Hey folks, just a quick warning. In this episode, we discuss some fairly intense subjects, including addiction, suicide, and other mental health challenges. Behind the triumphs and glory that grace the sporting arenas, there lies a lesser-known battle fought within the hearts and minds of these extraordinary individuals. Athlete mental health, a topic often shrouded in silence, but that holds immense importance. Behind every gold medal lies trauma, self-doubt, fear, and pain. From the darkest lows to our proudest moments, we'll discover the unbreakable spirit that resides within every athlete, reminding ourselves that mental health is not a barrier, but a catalyst for extraordinary achievements. Hey, we know David's on borrowed time here because he's got his son's football practice, and pretty soon the kids will be screaming and yelling and jumping in the car, right, David?
Yeah, pretty much.
So we'll kind of get rolling. I know you guys don't all know each other, but we'll have everybody do some introductions as part of the kickoff in a second here, and then I guess you'll get to know each other. But we really do appreciate everybody making the time to come on. We've been trying to put this together for a while. I think Co's been reaching out to folks for a couple months, and it just either us or you guys, somebody always had something going on, but we did it. So here we are. So I'll just get this thing rolling. So, hey, welcome everybody to another episode of the C4 podcast. We are doing things a little differently today. Typically what we do is we interview athletes either about their own journeys or we dive into a specific sport with groups of athletes in that sport. Today, we're covering a subject that's near and dear to Co's heart, athlete mental health. Okay. Before we dive in, I wanted to give a big congratulations to Davi Prate from episode 16. We wanted to have him on tonight. Unfortunately, we couldn't get everybody coordinated, but he just finished up getting his PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, with an emphasis in athlete mental health. And specifically, he's about trying to improve athletic performance through mental health. He couldn't be here tonight. Huge congratulations to him. One of the reasons he can't be here tonight, he's in the process of moving to Los Angeles. He is going to be working with the USC Trojans in helping them get their athlete mental health program put together. Incredibly excited for that. So if you guys see the Trojans football team just skyrocket through the roof this next year, it is all Davi being on the staff over there. So big congratulations to Davi. Another thing, quick shout out. We've been doing these small business shout outs. If you want your business mentioned, feel free to send us a DM. We're not charging for this. We're just trying to help out, get the word out. So staying on our theme of talking about businesses in Laos from the last podcast episode, we wanted to give a shout out to Kap Jai De restaurant in Vientiane. They invited us in when we were over there for the SEA Games with the Lao American athlete contingent, my daughter, and all the other athletes. We had an incredible meal there with the owner and everything. If you're in the Vientiane area, we highly recommend checking out Kap Jai De restaurant. I hope everybody on this call knows what that means. I'll put you on the spot, Malay.
I do know what that means. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Appreciate
all right.
I like the way you said it, but I definitely I understood.
Oh, my accent's horrible, right? You say it, Co. Sorry.
No, it's how
the tonal language, man. Give me some slack.
That's how Farang would say it, right? So.
That's right. Yeah, well, I did my best. All right, hey, with that, we're gonna just go. I mean, this was your idea for the episode. It's something near and dear to your heart. Before we even jump in, tell us why you wanted to cover this subject.
Well, I mean, initially we started with athletes, right? I mean, we wanted to focus on Southeast Asian athletes, right? Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Indonesia, stuff like that. I became a professional bodybuilder, and it was always my mindset from the very beginning of when I was young. It was all physical for me. I didn't think of anything. I didn't understand the psychology of it. I didn't know how to. I just pushed. I took. My story coming to the States at a young age, getting picked on, and just racism, bullying, all that stuff. I took all of that and used that negativity as my fuel. And, you know, of course, what ended up, I ended up crashing. And it's because I didn't understand the mental aspect of sports. No, I mean, I taught bodybuilding to myself, right? I learned how to eat by myself. Through books and magazines. So no one really, I was never under any type of coaching. It was just, um, it was just me learning, teaching myself. And I just thought it was all physical, 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 physical. I didn't even understand the game of politics, right? And then it is a game. It's a game of politics. I had no idea what that was. I just thought I'm going to train my butt off, and I'm going to present this amazing physique, and I'm going to win, and it's going to be great. But no. Long story short, I found out, man, it's just wow. There's such a difference. There's a mental aspect that shouldn't be overlooked, right? I mean, it should be appreciated actually. And to hear the word mental health, I didn't hear that growing up in the 70s and 80s. It was just physical, it was athlete. And nowadays, and understanding myself, like I didn't really like understand mental health until after I retired. And then I was like, what's going on with me? Then I realized I spent 30 plus years on bodybuilding, and now I'm done. And for a short period, I was like lost. I didn't know who I was. So that kind of opened up my eyes, like started thinking more, learning about like my feelings, my emotions, what's going on. And yeah, it's definitely, it's a very interesting subject. And with us, we have Southeast Asian athletes that we talk about on our podcast. I was like, wow, we never think about mental health coming from a Southeast Asian culture, right? Especially Lao culture, Thai culture. You don't talk about mental health. Everything is swept underneath the carpet or the rug. So to have, to do the show and have, three other athletes that are Southeast Asian and who, appreciate the mental health aspect, I thought, I'd love to hear what other athletes think about uh, the mental health aspect. So yeah, mental health. It's like I it's something that I work with every day. Every day is a brand new day for me. So some days are better than others, and I think the more I can learn and understand, those days, those majority of those days in my future are going to be better. So, but yeah, I thought the two subjects, it's just something you don't hear. You don't talk about athletes or athletics in the Southeast Asian culture, especially growing up when I did. And you sure as hell don't talk about mental health, depression, alcoholism, addiction. You just don't talk about that stuff. So, and I think it's time to where I believe we should, be more aware and bring that out into the light, so people can have a healthier life.
Thanks, Co. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to have each of these athletes briefly introduce themselves. They've all have full episodes that they participated in. Just tell us your name and your sport, starting with David from episode 7.
David. Last name is Boutsomsy. My parents, obviously from Laos, came over here to the States towards the end of the war and stuff. So we migrated to California, then happened to end up in the East Coast. But I'm currently living in South Bend, Indiana area. My sport, powerlifting. So I started in high school, did a little bit there, and then went away and played, football and chasing the dream of the NFL or at any professional level um, after high school. But powerlifting came back into my life. I think about 2012 when I linked up with a Samoan uh, coach who was a world champion, gold medalist, and he was a phenomenal coach until he suddenly tragically passed away in a car crash, which really took a toll on me, starting out fresh and new. But just go piggyback riding off of what Cole was saying, you don't speak about it. You don't really get underneath that skin to allow people in, because it is a mental game. It's you versus yourself. And at the end of the day, you have people cheering for you, you have supporters, from all over. But at the end of the day, it is you versus yourself. So, I mean, I think what you guys are doing as of today, tonight, is a great deal, because I think more and more people need to hear where we're coming from, not just as athletes, but as men and women. So
Yeah. And that's a great point. Co, you did an individual sport. David, you did an individual sport. It is you guys versus everybody else. There's no team really. There's no camaraderie. It's basically you, right? It's got to be
absolutely.
kind of a lonely world in powerlifting or bodybuilding.
It took
So,
me the longest time to figure out I was my own worst enemy. You
yeah,
know.
Oh yeah.
yeah,
But
great. So we'll keep going with the introduction. So next, we're going to go to Peter, episode 34. We wanted to have him on because his sport's interesting because it's a sport, but it's also acting, and it just last time he brought up some things about the whole mental game. You have to play with that.
it's a sport, man. It's a
It is a
sport.
sport, but it
Yeah,
combines multiple skills. So Peter, just briefly introduce yourself.
yeah, man, it's a challenge. So, my name is Peter Chanthaphone. I'm 37 years old. My father is Laotian and my mother is American. I live in Lafayette, Louisiana, and my sport is professional wrestling. So it's a crazy mix between athleticism, acting, and a whole bunch of crazy stuff. I started off really, really young, growing up watching it, loving it, and I fell in love with the lights, the sounds, just the adrenaline rush. Because as a kid, my grandfather would always take us to wrestling shows back in the day. He grew up in the Mid South times and all of that stuff, and I just remember what it was like sitting in the front row with a kid and arguing with all the wrestlers and getting to know everybody. And I wanted that for myself. So my sports definitely helped me out a lot and hurt me. I think when it comes down to sports and mental health, it can be a double-edged sword. Like Coach said, you did with us being part Asian and everything. We deal with a lot of bullying and stress like that just all the time. Me, man, I get mistaken for being Hispanic all the time. People come up to me to start speaking Spanish. And then when I tell people I'm Laotian, the first thing they say is, man, what
what's
is
that?
that? You know?
Yeah.
What's the difference? I thought you were Asian. Dude, Laos, China, we're all Asian. They don't, it really surprises me how some people don't understand that and get it. But yeah, man, I think when it comes down to mental health, I'm so glad that we can sit down today and be able to talk about things like this because it's something that definitely needs to be brought up a lot more. I know as a child and growing up, I was always kind of told to sit down and shut up and just deal with it.
Mhm.
And we all know that's not the right way to do things. Um, yeah, man, I mean, it's just so far with life, man. I do a lot of reading, a lot of self-development books. David Goggins, his books have absolutely changed my life. There's a lot of other guys I read up on, like Simon Sinek, regarding business and everything. And yeah, man, I'm happy to be here, and I'm actually honored that y'all picked me to come back. It means a lot to me, man.
Thanks. Glad to have you. All right. And then the last athlete here, Malay, episode 36, great interview. Malay's on here kind of from a two-pronged approach, right? Malay, you were an athlete in college and then founded your own roller derby club, but you're also kind of a newly minted mental health counselor. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate the introduction a little bit there, John. Yep, Malay Bouaphakeo. I'm actually in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm 40 years old. I don't know if we're supposed to say age, but I'll say I'm 40 years old. Just completed my master's in mental health therapy and counseling. I've been a life coach for the last 8 years as well. So I've got a lot of, interest in the mental health aspect of life, really. I mean, obviously with my master's a little bit more on the therapy side, but I mean, mental health, regardless of culture in athletes is something that I still even struggle with that kind of carries into my, sometimes personal life as well. So maybe that's something that we speak on a little bit later, but yeah, so it interests me a lot, and we talk about mental health here. All of us have said it, we don't Our parents weren't like that. They were, they don't ask us how we're doing. They don't ask us what we feel. They barely really even ask us about our sports, really, and even then, they are, I mean, first generation immigrant. They're trying to survive in this, in the US. They don't, some of them speak English, some of them don't, some of them read it, some of them don't read it, can't write it. So there's a lot of challenges in that. So when you are, left as a child growing up in the US, you got to find your way somehow, right? You've got to find ways to be able to, I guess, get your own needs taken care of physically and mentally, really. So we find that a lot in sports, as I'm sure most of us here know, that's where we found a lot of validation in ourselves in some way. But anyhow, I'll stop talking right now. But that's me in a nutshell.
All right. So that's the team. So now we're going to go back to you, David. And I'm going to kind of throw a prompt out, and and then even you, Malay, as a counselor, can chime in. But so just kind of tell us about what you would hear from a mental standpoint. I mean, you're a sport of all. I think of powerlifting, you just think it's about strength, right? But the mental side is also tremendous. What was the most challenging thing from a mental aspect of your incredible powerlifting career? How'd you overcome that, and then maybe what you would do differently today?
I think the most critical and vital part in powerlifting is the preparation. Um, you could sit here and say, well, I use it, for example, the Arnolds, competing at the Arnolds is a very prestigious, event, and it's an honor to ever be selected to go on stage and compete at the highest level. I mean, you're going against the best of the best in the world, the most strongest men and women in the world, and you have to go up there and you got to bring your A game. There's no turning back. There's no, what I could done today, what could I have done today, because once it's over, it's over. But I think the preparation is just like, Cole in bodybuilding. You may have an event that's a year out and you're preparing for that main event, and for approximately maybe less than 3 minutes. And it's never enough time to prepare for an event like that. You think you have a lot of time, but then when it inches closer and closer, the mental game is so tough, because now either you second guess yourself, you second guess your attempts, you just doubt yourself the day of. As you're getting up, you can't sleep, you can't think straight. So a lot of fear. You're going up there in front of a massive crowd, and the fear of just, if I let myself down, I'm letting everybody down. You're not just representing yourself. You're representing your people, you're representing your family, your last name. You're like a walking billboard. So I think the biggest thing I would do, now that I didn't compete last year, um, is to slow things down. Control what you can control internally, and everything else will work out itself. And then the biggest thing is, I would say, is uh, stay injury free, especially in a sport like that, which requires a lot of strength and power, but at the same time, like you mentioned before, it's a mental thing. So I think that's what I would do differently, is just slow it down, and just see it from afar and attack it that way.
I think there's something that you said in there was, you prepare for this whole year. I mean, you got to give up a lot in your life,
Yeah,
whether that be your diet, your time, your family, your job, or whatever that is. So that's a sacrifice in itself. And then you mentioned, you know, there's never enough time, right? So have I done enough? Have I, XYZ? We can just kind of keep that list
yeah,
going as athletes. Have I prepared enough for this moment? And in this moment, am I enough? So we amount these days of competition, we amount these days of, the main event, to all the work that we do that maybe tells us, are we enough?
absolutely.
And so that in itself, and then it's a continuum. If you're playing a sport where you've got a game the next day, you've got a game, 3 days from now. How do you recover from my performance 3 days ago? And did I do enough there? And if I didn't, now I'm letting either my teammates down or myself down. But more importantly, like, even if I did good, I have to continue to do good. I have to show up always in that role, or perform at that level, because that's what people expect of me. So there's that constant pressure in that way. And people are watching you, right? People are watching you, and there's a level of judgment that comes from our number one, ourselves, but
Absolutely.
others, fans, coaches, whoever that might be, family. So there's constant judgment coming at us. And how do we kind of clear that noise, right? Like, how do we just quiet that noise? And you said, how do we slow down and focus on the things that we can control as these things are coming at us, all the time, in constant, preparation for competition or showtime in those ways.
Absolutely. I mean,
David,
it's yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's, I mean, I think the hardest thing now in today's world is social media. Uh, we can sit here. I'm old school, so we can sit here and say, yeah, we're gonna block out the noise. We say that, but how do you channel that, internally, and really, truly block that out to perform at your highest, ability, on game day, and the judging. I mean, like I said before, we're all walking billboards, and the constant judging of, or just the letdowns, fear of that is so high. So some people get on stage and they croak. Some people can handle it, as best they could. But I mean, at the same time, we all at some point in our lives feel that pressure. It just, everybody fights a battle every single day, I think. So,
And David,
but
man, dude, I'm with you on that. And I think social media is such a good thing because, it actually helps you. It's easier to promote things, bring more awareness. But at the same time, man, it could be such a devil because people are so cold-hearted and they will critique you to the tiniest bit on everything. They'll dig dirt up on you from 10 years ago, and cancel culture is just so crazy. And nowadays, people, they don't want to just point out one fault. They want to end your career,
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I think David said it there, like, how do we turn down the noise? And that there's not like one answer to that ever. Every one of us has our own, journey to go on if we decide to explore that. And I think it goes back to the point of, we aren't taught to explore it, though, in our culture, right? That isn't something that is normal for us, or it's easy to, engage in that conversation, because we simply just weren't parts of those conversations, and we didn't have those opportunities when we were younger. So, twofold there. It's being able to find that avenue and want to explore. How do we do that?
Well, there's something I can share with you guys real quick. I'll see if you can see it on the screen enough. It's called The Subtitle Art of Not Giving Up. And it's a great book, man. It really is.
It's a good book. Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, and it kind of answers your question. In this world today, you can't, like David said, you can only control what you can control. And that includes your mentality. So to me, my personal belief, and this book helped me out a lot, was just learning what you really should care and not care about. The things that you should pay attention to, and the things just say, screw it, it is what it is. I'm not saying that it's still going to happen regardless, because we're all human, but it definitely helps and teaches you how to gauge what's really important and what really matters in your life.
Yeah, and that's it, right? It's differentiating between what's important and what's not. It's not just, I mean, the book and the title isn't just not caring, or not giving a fuck. It's not caring about the things that don't matter.
Right, exactly.
And David talked about shutting things off. I shut things off easily when I was up and coming in body. We didn't have social media at that time. Or even cell phones. If I had a cell phone, I left it I left it in the locker room and I went and I focused on the gym. But now today you look at the new group of athletes that they use their gym as a way to market and promote themselves and all that stuff. Me, I just used the gym again at that time, train as hard as I can, and that was it. There was no other motive other than being better, for my next contest. But it's a double-edged sword, man. It's kind of like, yeah, people, you got to market yourself, you got to promote yourself. People want to see what you're doing, but man, there's some nasty people on social media, man. There's nasty people way back that I would get personal emails from way back, back in the day when we didn't have a website or nothing, man. And people are ruthless, man. And then they hide that behind that anonymity.
I want to say, we're talking about social media right now, and if we could do these things, you know what I mean? If we could put down the phone, and if we do put down the phone and not engage in that social media activity where there is that constant judgment, you think about what's left with us, right? What's left after that? It's us. We're left with our own voices in our own head, right? Like our own self-talk, which is even more defeating than what comes at us, because it is things that we have believed about ourselves. And that's probably the scariest road to explore, because it's actually just sitting with yourself and processing what those things might be for each one of us. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Well, if your parents were anything like my parents, I didn't have much to think about. I didn't have much to think of myself at all. I did not think, you know,
and that's your answer right there.
yeah.
So, or that's the deeper pieces of that is that if you had parents like mine, I didn't get that.
Right.
And so what is that impact with that, right? And for me, I will say, it's not like my parents didn't pay attention to my sports, but that's where I got a lot of validation of who I was, right? In a small town Iowa, an immigrant town where, all of our parents and all of the Laotians and Cambodians and Vietnam and Thai worked at a meat processing plant, right? But low skill labor. And a kid from that product, like, what do I amount to? Oh, well, I happen to actually be good at sports, right? So it's that constant, like, I'm going to stand out, right? I'm going to work really hard to stand out so I can be noticed, so I can be seen, right? Because I wasn't being seen by my parents in that way that made me feel good, right? Because Asian parents aren't verbal, right? They don't express themselves verbally. I mean, hell, they hardly express themselves physically as well to us, as even as children, and even as adults. I mean, we talk about that, but those are the things that we're trying to fill, or that I tried to fill in my void of growing up as an athlete. And then the place where I get stuck is like, if I'm this good, I have to constantly show up that good. And can I constantly show up that good? Well, if I don't try as hard, I won't have to live up to that high expectation, and that becomes, your own mental blockage. And the other piece of it, when athletics are gone, right? If wrestling is gone, if bodybuilding's gone, if softball's gone, we're still left with ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's
why I think mental health is so important.
It's
such an important because for that reason.
So, I agree, man, for sure. Me on my regular 9-to-5 job, I work an hour and a half away from home, and I drive another hour and a half back. So I have a lot of time in the car. Is just like, man, one of the worst places to be, because my mind is just flowing with things, and I'm going a million miles an hour. But touch on what you said, yes, I think I'm my own worst enemy, definitely. This past weekend, I had a really, really big opportunity with wrestling, and I'm glad I did it, but it took a lot for me to do it. And the crazy part about it is I was hired to go to a place in Texas, and I worked for this company called TSW, and what they did was they do studio-style wrestling. So it's not a big WWE arena or anything like that. It's very small. but there's lights, there's cameras, there's entranceways, there's TV production. They're on Fight TV, they are on their own app, and the company is ran by people I've been known for years. But the locker room is very different. A lot of big names, a lot of superstars and stuff, and it was just an environment I had never been in before. And I was intimidated as hell, even though I was going up there and I was working with people I knew. It was scary, and I almost missed out on a big opportunity because I just felt like I wasn't good enough. You know, I almost felt like I didn't deserve to be there. But luckily, I mean, I sucked it up and went, and everything went fine, and we got invited to go back.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What was that? What was that last piece of advice you gave yourself to go through with it?
Really, and I know I keep going back to these books, man, like the David Goggins and this stuff book, and I just find they help me out so much because in his last book he talks about front loading, and like Malay said, at the end of the day, what happens when sports are gone? And once he started talking about front loading, that's something I've been trying to incorporate in my life. And what front loading is basically accepting that one day pro wrestling is going to be gone for me. One day bodybuilding is going to be gone for you. One day powerlifting is going to be gone with you. And I want to be able to look back and say, hey, I front loaded enough and did as much as I could so that when that day comes and I have to stop, I can be happy and I can be content with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
You guys
Yeah.
all hit it on the head, man. I mean, everything I want to say, you guys already said it. Going from my parents, our upbringing, to bullying, to feeling so isolated. You know, me growing up, I didn't have a mom and dad that was supportive of anything. I didn't get to really truly have a relationship with my father until I was in my 20s. So growing up in a single household, mom didn't speak any English. We live in Section 8 housing. Went from Section 8 housing to a trailer park. Just growing up so hard. Not having much, but to call our own. But athletics was my way out. It was my release from the hurt, the pain, the being judged from all corners, always being bullied all the time, and it just brings back so much of that childhood that was so much, you know, so many battles, at home, outside of home, at school, on the playground, everywhere, amongst the Laotian community. You always have people say, Luke, when me Paul, all the time. You hear it all the time. So it was always a put down, So you walk around like, am I ever going to be good enough? So that mental game started very young. And then it just, as you gradually get older, it just channels differently. And you may not even notice it then, but as you get older, I became a very angry person. I had a lot of anger issues because I didn't know how to channel it. I didn't have anyone to talk to.
Yeah.
So it was really tough. It was really tough, it's just me and my sister, me and my sister and my mom, and just not knowing where we're gonna stay the next time or where we're gonna move to again. And so we were always hopping around all the time. So it was a very unstable environment growing up. But at the same time, my only thing that kept me going was sports. I had family members who was involved with the Bloods and Crips, gang banging and stuff. You know, I could have easily went that direction, but I didn't. And sports saved my life. But at the same time, it many lessons. Um, Going back to what you guys are saying about parents and stuff. The Laotian community. Our parents don't show us emotions. It's always shut up. Don't worry about it. And it's always a cutthroat. It's never why do you want to waste your time playing sports? It's not going to bring any money in the house. It's always about
Yep.
that. It's never good enough. Why are you gonna play football for? Why are you gonna do that? You're wasting your life away. We didn't come to the United States for you to play and waste your life, away off of that stuff. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it. I think it molds us as people. Maybe we didn't know it then, but as you get older, you reflect back. It molds us in so many different ways, the good and the bad. So I think it's critical that in our stories, we exchange our stories. We can take a little bit from each other, and it's crazy because we all feel the same way.
Yeah, man, even just coming on here is it's very mentally relieving to me. Like I said, I can't express how much it means to me that you guys actually asked me to come. Because like y'all, I struggle with my parents, especially my dad. With my mom being American, Laos wasn't really spoken very much in my household, so I can't speak Laos. I really wish I could. Me and him, we never really saw eye to eye, and excuse me, but one of the things I struggled with the most, and I kind of told Cole and him last time, was I struggled with the Laotian community mostly. When I was a kid, with Laos New Year, all that stuff, and it was basically known that I wasn't wanted there because I couldn't speak Laos, and I was a half breed. I was a mud. I'm sorry, excuse me.
No problem.
Don't excuse yourself at all, Peter. Thank you for being vulnerable with
it. You're good,
man. And just to set the stage for those of you who haven't
it.
heard Peter's episode, he grew up they call it like the Lao village. It's like there's the area. It's literally all the streets are named after Lao cities, and it's like this isolated Lao community, right, Peter?
Yeah,
where you
live.
And so
once I hit that middle school, preteen kind of years, I started getting integrated with a lot more Laotian kids, and they just knew I was different. I wasn't like them. I couldn't speak, so I always felt kind of like I was an outcast. But there was wrestling for me every Monday night on TV, watching and watching and watching it. And I got my tights right here. I got my wrestling gear, and that's the first thing you see on the side of my pants.
Yeah.
So, he helped out a lot, man. And I know we talk about our parents a lot. And me and my dad did struggle for a long time with our relationship. And one of the things I had to learn to do myself was forgive him. Like you said, your parents just want you to work, make money. I almost had to take a step back and realize, like, how would I feel if I was a 15-year-old kid having to leave home and staying in a refugee camp for a year? Coming into a place where I didn't know how to speak and still having to build a life. All they knew was sink and swim, and that was passed on to us growing up in a whole different area. So that was something I had to start learning how to be vulnerable about with him, and give him some leeway and some forgiveness along with that, and stop blaming him so much, because I blamed him for so long for so many things.
So you may not know this, Peter, but after we did that last post on you and Sangpet, when you guys did that wrestling match, he sent us a personal note thanking us and saying how proud of you he is.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know that, but he sent it to us. So
no, I didn't, man. And getting to meet him was great. I looked it up. I don't know if I am, but I still think I was the first Laotian wrestler that I know of. He was the second one, and Sean was the third. But yeah, the match with me and him it was fun. He's a character.
I meant your dad. Just to be clear, I was talking about your dad sent us a personal note.
Oh, he did?
About how proud he was of you.
I didn't know
thanking us for featuring you. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that was very nice.
He's a character, man. I'm very proud of him too. He's come a long way.
Yeah.
I mean, Peter and David, like, sharing your story like that, being vulnerable, that is trauma, right? And I know trauma can be like a weird word because we don't want to associate ourselves with something that feels really heavy like that, but it's trauma. And that's something that I want to, that I'm pushing as a mental health therapist, is that these are things that it's okay to talk about. Like, we've all had trauma in our lives, and being able to say that word and, accept that. We don't have to accept it as our reality today, as in, like, we live in that trauma world, right? We can break free from the trauma, which, Peter, it sounds like you have, and David, you as well, is we can break free from that trauma and see it as these things, like you said, Peter, you let go of the things that you were angry about with your dad and seeing him in a different way, even because he also experienced trauma, right? He also experienced, like you said, can you imagine being 15, having to live in a refugee camp and then come to a country where you literally know nothing. Like
Yeah.
that's some shit. That's things I don't know that I would be able to do if I was when I was 15, you know? And so like those are all things that we can, if we choose to explore them as just people in general, but we're speaking as athletes, as people, that shows up as in our athletic abilities, right? Or an athletic prowesses, right? Well, what we're going for, that shows up. So when we can explore these things, we don't have to be our best. Like you said, David, I can let go of the things I can't control, right? Because we're holding on to that control so much. If we work, we do, we'll get, right? But if
Yeah.
we let go of that, including some of that, some of that trauma in the way that it kind of holds us hostage in those ways, we can be free from those things, right? And then we actually have more mental capacity for other things.
Going back to like what Peter was saying too, like being, Laotian, feeling not accepted, is a is was such a big deal growing up, and even today, here and there, you feel like sometimes you're accepted, sometimes you're not, but you question it because, like you said earlier, you get mistaken for being Hispanic or whatever. I get mistaken all the time for being Hispanic all the time, or even questioning if I was if I was black. It's funny, but I mean it's whatever. But
You kind of
but
tan.
yeah, exactly. Uh, but I just roll with it. It's whatever. But my other job, is being a police officer in a very dangerous and homicidal, city in South Bend. So I deal with a lot of highs and lows, on calls that I don't think the average person could handle something like that. From watching a 4-year-old being shot and killed, and I have to be there on a call trying to save his life, or being on a call where someone is being sexually assaulted, and you have to go in there and gather information. But I look at my kids. I have a 4-year-old at home. I have teenagers at home, and I have to look at them and think, man, imagine that if that was your children, and you have to be that strong Superman, and you have to be that strong person for everybody, even though you may struggle, which I'm not gonna lie, I do struggle. I do struggle with mental health, and I think I've been struggling the last several years. Um, it's been a lot of pressure, and I'm just trying to hold back my emotions right now because this is the first time I actually get to really talk about it, because you don't really have anyone who you feel that you can talk to and that will give them your time. So it is struggle. It's a struggle, but I think right now as we're talking about it, little by little, it does release a lot of the emotional, baggage that you've been holding on, And going back to what you're saying, Peter, too, even with your dad, I struggled not knowing who my father was, but only knew bits and pieces of what what man he was, being a POW, Vietnam War, being captured and then fleeing the country to come over here, and him and my mom in a refugee camp. They left so many people back home in Laos. Who knows if they're alive or not? I was just contacted last week actually by my aunt saying that the only survival of his side of the family, his brother and sister, is the only one remaining, in Laos, and they were trying to get a hold of me. So I was just like, wow, that's powerful, and I think being like what you guys were saying earlier, nobody knows about our culture, nobody knows who we are. You say Laos and no one even knows what that is. So sometimes, back when I was growing up, I would have to say, well, I'm Thai, just so that it's something to grab a hold on to, because nobody knows what Laos is. So I just say Thai. So it's like growing up, you have to fake it to make it. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of our culture. I'm proud of all you guys. We've never met physically, but I feel we connect in so many ways. And again, I'm honored again to be back on the show and be able to express, you know, my life and my stories and where I came from amongst you guys too. So I really do appreciate that.
David,
Really.
selfishly, there see as mental health therapists. Like I don't want you to wait till maybe this podcast to be able to open up. I appreciate that you have found this ability to be able to do it with this medium, but seek a therapist. You just talked about being a police officer too. You're adding lots of layers onto lots of things.
Yeah.
So just encourage you selfishly, see a therapist.
I just turn it off and come home. I mean, that's like Cole was saying earlier. You can easily turn it off, but that is something that I can do. I know a lot of people can't do it. I see I see a lot of tragedy. I really do. I mean, it's god awful out here. There's a lot of things I don't tell people what I see or what I go through out here. I just go home. I go home to my kids. You know, with my son being a football player, we travel a lot. So all my energy is for my family and my kids. I grew up with nothing. So the pride and joy that I have giving back to them, that's where all my focus is at, and you're
You
right,
learned it. You learned to turn it off
yeah,
as children, but we don't really turn it off, David. We don't. Like we learn how to do it in those moments, right? So that we can
right.
continue on. But we hold on to a lot.
Look, man,
Yeah.
David, for one, man, thank you for your service, dude, because I have mad respect for any kind of police officer, military veteran, or even school teachers. Some of the stuff you guys have to put up with, man, is unbelievable, Uh,
It's very, very underappreciated.
Yep.
definitely. But like she said, man, open up, dude, because you can only turn on. I truly believe, and like I'm not a therapist or anything, but you can only turn on and off for so long, man. That stuff builds up, And I know personally, I'm pretty good at it myself. At work, I'll turn things on, turn things off, and then there's been a few times where I've ashamed to admit it, but me and my wife will have a little argument, over something not having to do with work. Something happens with her and I, and next thing you know, I explode. Everything comes out at once,
It's
Yeah.
crazy. And I've never publicly said this, but I feel so strongly about it because I know whoever's gonna watch this, it's gonna connect with somebody, and I feel that I should share it. When I was going through what I was going through with the police department, years back, and I was struggling. I really was. And at one point, I almost ended my life. Sitting in my squad car, I cried many nights. I was struggling so bad. It was just, I could not figure out why I was struggling as hard as I was, even though I was a strong person, you know, emotionally, physically, mentally, I was a strong person. I could take a lot. I had to grow up fast. But a couple years back, I had my service weapon next to me. I was contemplating so hard, and I had it out, and I just kept thinking to myself, I just had a newborn, and I was just thinking to myself, if I ended myself right now, would anybody care? Eh, eh, You know, am I valuable to anybody? I just felt like I was a ghost. I was walking around empty. Like I felt like, I go to work, do my thing, I service my community. I do everything for my family, but I just felt like, man, I'm not good enough in this world. And I was battling real hard. And if it wasn't for my wife, man, it would have been over with. But man, she stuck beside me, and that's a strong woman, man. So she got me through it, and I'm here today. So
David, for you to share something like that, it's like an honor for all of us that you feel safe enough to do that. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you're still here today, because like you said, whoever listens to this podcast or whatnot will take take little bits and pieces out of this conversation, and I'm hoping that, you know, with what you just shared could also be, you know, maybe even life-saving for someone. So that's
Yeah.
like really appreciated.
There's someone
Yeah,
else
because-
thinking about that now, to be honest, right? There's somebody out there at that point also. So
Yeah,
dude,
'cause
I'm glad I
mean,
got to meet you today. Kel, I
Yeah.
got Koa, a pro bodybuilder. I got you, a powerlifter. Dude, I'm ready to hit the gym. You know, I got me pumped.
Well, and it's that saying though, it's like you are not alone, right? I mean, that has to be. I don't think just saying it and having signs about it is going to make people, you know, understand it. But it's just believing in that. You know, people have to know that there's an outlet. People have to know, you know, especially nowadays. Nowadays, there's a lot of resources and tools that you can use, and help is available. But when I was coming up, I felt that sense of loneliness. Now I don't know if I ever got to the point of where I I wanted to kill myself, but I knew that there are days where I didn't want to live, and I'm just like, you know, it's like I'd rather be a little bitch, you know. It's like, oh, okay, kill, you know, and like I could do anything. I could, you know, imagine like, you know, harming myself or committing the act, but he's like, man, if I don't live, I don't live, you know, and I just, yeah, man, it's just. And I think this is important, and I'm so glad you guys came on and shared, David, bro. Man, dude, I appreciate you, man. In more ways than one, you know. And
I've never told that to anybody, man, and publicly,
Yeah.
and
Well, thank you,
just-
bro. That means a lot to
yeah,
you, dude.
You know,
I-
I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, that, you know, suicidal ideation is actually very common. And people think about it a lot more than we want to talk about. But we are human. Now, obviously, where it becomes dangerous is when we start maybe making plans, we start, you know, going down that route. But you know, suicide ideation is actually somewhat normal.
Mhm.
Is that surprising to anybody on this?
No, because
No.
in a way, I kind of felt like that already. So to hear that doesn't really surprise me too much. I kind of had a situation similar to his. So I think everybody thinks about it at least once or twice, you know. So of course, some people to different levels and degrees, but I think it crosses people's mind at least once or twice.
you know what saves my life, or what has saved my life, and it's what my father taught me at a very young age. Now, being Laotian, you're Buddhist, and he's always sharing like wisdom with me, right? And I must have been feeling bad or got in a fight with my mom or something, and I probably said something like, "Nah, I don't want to live anymore, and I don't want to be here anymore." And he taught me, you know, there's that proverb about like committing suicide, and how that's worse. Taking your own life is worse than taking, you know, it's worse than murder. Murder, you're murdering somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Suicide, you're taking away the gift that was given to you.
Right.
And it's like anybody that goes through something now, you know, whether it's true or not, what he told me, he just said like, you're gonna live in eternal hell, like for the rest of your life. And that was enough to scare me, man. Because I'm like, okay, this is one bad day. I can't imagine, you know, 1,000 of these, you know, rolling up together, you know. And that was enough for me to say, I don't want to do that. But yeah, it's just, you know, some things he would share with me, and like, you know, I mean, yeah, there's some religions, I guess, that suicide is not. What's the word I'm trying to say? It's like it's forbidden, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's one thing that, yeah, having him tell me that stuck with me for the longest time, ever since I was a kid. And I just always like, God, I would say to myself, if the day got bad, if the day is bad, imagine having this day over and over and over for eternity. Right? And that's just, I'm okay. Well, that's enough for me to. I didn't want any part of that.
So Malay, why don't we hear from you a little bit? Tell us about the biggest challenge for you in your athletic pursuits, meant from a mental side.
I mean, I think I kind of mentioned it a little bit before, is like, you know, being great. Like, we all want to be great and we all want to work towards that greatness, but then there's also that fear of having to show up as great all the time. It's like, you have to, you're expected to show up and play and perform the same way every time because something or someone is counting on you. So that's probably my biggest block as an athlete, is that if I'm too good, then I'm gonna have to live up to that really good, all the time. And that seemed like really overwhelming to me. And that was my struggle.
Yeah. Wow. That's good. So, Peter, I know you kind of touched on this, but give us kind of, again, a brief overview of the biggest struggle you had in your athletic pursuits from a mental perspective.
Me, man, it's crazy because there's so many different aspects. In pro wrestling, I know you see different characters, you see different bodies, you see different colors, athletes, all kind of stuff. I know whenever we did the wrestling podcast, me and Alan, we talked about the it factor. But in pro wrestling, you have to have what's called the it factor, but nobody can actually tell you what it is. It's a business, so you have to be marketable. You have to have something that sells, something different, something outside of the box, whether it be your look, your athleticism, the way you talk on the microphone, anything like that. So, I mean, I was a 17-year-old kid stripped down to my underwear in front of a bunch of grown men, and they're pointing at me, telling me, you need to work on this in your body. You need to look this way. You need to tan. You need to do this, and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, some of the things I pretty much, back then, those days, it was almost like a fraternity. And they beat the crap out of you. They wanted to make sure you could hang with them. I mean, some of the stuff I had to go through is probably borderline child abuse because I was so young getting into it. But the peer pressure around it, man, around 2005 and 6, when I was in my 20s, was when I kind of experimented with the steroids and a lot of the drug use and everything. I find that the deeper I got into the pro wrestling world and finding out the kind of lifestyle you had to live, like you guys talked about showing up and preparing yourself for a contest or being the best. In pro wrestling, there's no on or off season. It's 24/7. I have 4 to 5 shows a month, which is pretty much every weekend. My body hurts each and every day, and I'm not even doing it on the level that some of these guys are. So I quit. I quit for a long time because I kind of fell out of love with it. And what happened was 2010 was my last match. In 2017, my mother passed away. At that time, my father wasn't working. Him and my sister, they moved in with me. I was helping them financially. I just had to dish out 14 grand for my mother's funeral. And I had a situation kind of similar to David's. I was at my parents' house. It was empty. Nobody was even living there. And my cousin came, pulled me out, and she's like, hey, you need to go back to wrestling, do something for yourself. And that's how I got back into it. But going back into it, I had to tell myself that this time I couldn't go balls to the wall. I couldn't be around the drugs and the peer pressure and everything, especially having a family now. So right now, it still can be a very toxic environment with the backstage politics and the bookings and the money and all of the peer pressures. But it's just me trying to keep a healthy balance now. It was the best part.
Wow.
How did you stay clear of, and I don't know, you can share if you want or not, but did you have any issues? Again, wrestling. I mean, I followed my whole life. Injuries. You're injured, but you got to work. So was there any temptation to use painkillers?
I use them a lot, man, especially in my younger years. So this is where my dad's hard work, Laotian mentality kind of always stuck with me. At the time I was in my early 20s, and I had just got back from a road trip in Arkansas. I just started a cycle of tests 2 weeks before. I had done a line of cocaine and smoked a bunch of marijuana on the trip. So my parents never gave me anything. Even in high school, I had to work for cars, vehicles, and all of that stuff, and I had all of these bills and stuff like that. And I caught on fire at my job. I burnt my left arm and had second-degree burns, and I got drug tested. And then next thing you know, my income was gone. So it was like, what the hell am I gonna do now? And like that was a very crappy feeling to knowing that I gave away my income and my livelihood and all of that just for some partying, you know. So I kind of took that and ran with it, and I decided at the moment it wasn't worth it. You know, it really wasn't. Now I just, with injuries and stuff, man, I just take time if I need it. Sometimes I back off. I'll cancel a few shows if I need to because to me it's just not that important. I'll hyperextend my knee not that long ago. Took a few weeks off. Did what I had to do. You know, it's just a path I don't want to go behind because I've seen so many people do it. I recently just had a friend 2 months ago who drank himself to death. 38 years old. You know, I don't want to end up like that.
Wow.
That's one thing I noticed too. Grow up in bodybuilding, I saw a lot of deaths, like from my 20s and on, and guys were my peers. Guys in their 20s are dying. I'm in my 30s. Guys in their 30s are dying. Guys in the 40s. Then I follow wrestling, and they're dying all the time. You know, they're dying young. You know, and it's pretty. It's gloomy. It's talk about, you know, like that environment that you're in. It's you know.
I almost feel like with wrestling, and I don't know if anybody else feels like that when it comes down to sports or just any kind of entertainment like that, but I almost felt like I was sold a broken dream, you know? Like, hey man, this is pro wrestling, this is what it looks like on TV, you know, all the glitz, the glamour, the money, and then when you get into you just learn about this dark side, you know. They don't market that, and of course they're not. They shouldn't because they wouldn't make money if they did.
Yeah.
Bodybuilding was the old magazines of the guy Charles Atlas at the beach, and women are all hanging all over him.
Yeah.
And it's nothing. It is nothing like that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so Malay, I mean, as the counselor, you've heard a lot of different angles here, but I think there's some common themes.
Yeah.
Give us some kind of parting thoughts on all this.
I mean, you know, overall, I heard everyone's story, which again, I appreciate everyone, you know, talking about this. Is, you know, we don't sit down at a dinner table and just start, you know, chit-chatting about our trauma or our, you know, our childhood growing up. And this is not a daily coffee conversation. So it's a hard topic to explore, but to explore it, and to take the step to do it is the first hardest thing that you got to do, you know. But some common things that I heard, I mean, we're talking about athletes, right? Then we talk about the cultural aspect of it, you know. And so the common things that I've heard is, you know, am I enough, right? Finding sports as a place to belong, and then finding out, you know, trying to work ourselves into, like, again, if I'm doing these things, like, am I enough? Have I done enough? You know, who am I when I've had all these things that have happened in my life? I've found sports, and it should amount to something, right? It should amount to this happiness. It should amount to, you know, validating who I am as a person. But when, you know, when those things are become a little bit further out of reach, right? Or, you know, no longer in our lives anymore, you know, we've got to look at ourselves and wonder how we're showing up, not only just as athletes, right? And why we, you know, have identified sports as this, you know, medium of figuring those things out. All these traumas that we've heard, even in stories today, is like, you know, drug use, you know, the suicide ideation, you know, ways to be able to cope with the enormous, like, pressure that we give ourselves, right? But also the enormous pressure that we're kind of taught culturally in those ways. And so that's kind of common thing that I've heard here. And again, I'll be biased again and be a little, you know, selfish, but mental health, you know, find a therapist. I appreciate this forum to be able to put that out there and say this is okay to talk about, and you're not also alone in, you know, in your story, because we all find comfort in a place where we can belong, and this has given us a forum to belong in these ways. But we can even do more of it by exploring these things for ourselves.
Very good. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Malay. And then, so we're going to wrap up, folks. Go ahead, Co.
I want to
Parting
add one
thoughts.
thing in regards to therapists. When you find one and you get results and you're feeling good, don't just think that I don't need this anymore and I'm cured. I made the mistake of that. It's like it should be a continuous, lifelong journey. You know, I mean, you don't got to go every week or every other week, but when you find someone that you're comfortable with, and that's the thing too, you're gonna have to shop around. You know, not just go with the first one that you know comes up, and see how you fit. You know, how you get along with that person, and it's. I'm still seeing a therapist. You know, I go once a month. I still go to AA meetings. because it's just, if I didn't tell anybody, I'm an alcoholic, but I still go because like, I don't think, for me, I know that I could never have the attitude of, okay, I'm fixed. And like, let's move on.
I will say when I was life coaching at the same time, before I was a therapist, I saw a lot of people who were doing therapy and life coaching, right? So using different mediums to be able to help yourself in some way, or resources to help yourself in some way, is totally okay, and accept that, because it should be what we give to ourselves.
Yeah. And it's definitely like who you surround yourself with, the people, the environment you surround yourself with, like, had you guys been around when I was 13, 14 years old, I might have come up, differently, but I didn't have anybody, talking about how we're all growing up with. I didn't have anyone at 12 or 13. So it was all bottled up, it was my fuel, it was my anger, but, it took me far, but also it caused me to crash. So,
wow. Well, thanks, Co. Thanks, everybody. Hey, guys, very brave of you to come on. This is a very powerful episode. We appreciate everybody being open and honest, because there are other folks out here that hopefully this episode will help and bring about awareness, let them know they're not alone in these struggles, whether they're an athlete or not, to be honest. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
The C4 podcast is brought to you by the Lao American Sports Hall of Fame. Visit us on the web at laoamericansports.com, celebrating the first, inspiring the next.